pretty sure it's working, I'm just gonna check.
Okay, welcome to the August 21st Master Plan Subcommittee meeting. We have begun the process of reviewing the questionnaire and worked through the first 14 questions out of the 28, the last meeting. And the draft was sent out to the members pertaining to the changes that were talked about. What I'd like to do first is that we've kind of made the idea that we're going to work for an hour and see how we're
Great.
doing, so that we're not overtaxing our cognition. And then also, Phil is not going to be here, he's sick, and he will be taking minutes for the meeting. But what I'd like to do is review the changes that we talked about and to see if there's anything else that we want to address in those changes. If that's okay.
Before going directly into the questions, one of the items that was covered last time, being the minutes,
Yes.
presented last time, Salem, was the put together criteria list for the questions as to how guide, do they meet, the questions meet a certain standard?
Right.
So if I could just review those very quickly
Yeah,
before going in.
go slow.
So the first is that the question should not be leading the participant to artificially affirm or reject a topic. Second bullet is that the question should be unique, clear, and discerning. Third criteria is that the question should educate participants where possible or applicable. Number 4, the question should not imply judgment on a topic, the available answers, or on the participant. The next criteria is they provide that the question should provide the selectable answers for improved analytics. So what this means is, in contrast to open-ended questions, so this would be, where possible, have selectable answers with an other option. And then the last is that the question should be considerate of the general knowledge of what we consider sort of such thing as an average where resident, right? So the question should be within the knowledge set of the sort of an average person, not be obscure, even if unintentionally.
Right. No big words.
Okay.
Or little words that don't get used much. Okay. So those specific points were not in the minutes, but it does reference the question criteria issue there. And okay. So, if I can find my scribbles. All right, last meeting we talked to, that questions 1 and 2, question 2 was not necessary. Question 3 would be answered in expanding question 1 and 2. And then age group, question 8 on the original one is question 7 here. Needed to be expanded to up in age. And then we wanted to add marital status, and income. And those are reflected in the first 12 questions now on the first page.
And for the ranges, like for instance, well, really questions 5, 6, 7,
Yep.
8, and 12, the ones that are kind of redlined with ranges, how do we arrive at those ranges? Is there like a standard to?
No.
Okay.
So what I would, as I thought about it, because I thought, oh gee, this is a little more over the top as far as detail is concerned, but the first 40 years or 30 years, we can go into every 5 years, and then from there up, go up 10 to kind of cut down the number of, as far as the age group, in our first one, it said 20 or under, but then it stopped at 65 and over, and there's a greater population that's better represented, especially when you looked at the reporting was in an age group that was 45 to 64, which is a 20-year period. Well, which end is it? The upper end, the lower end, is it the middle? So that's why we talked about breaking that out a little better for number 7.
Okay.
The only thing else that, as far as, so my thought was to say stop at 25 to 30 for both living in where, and then go 10s. And how long you plan to live, and that way it will cut down the
I think that's
clutter.
reasonable.
And then I wanted to, when I looked at marital status, I just cut and pasted that, because we referenced something that was in another document, and I couldn't find it in another document that was recommended or referenced. So I'm thinking that I'd like to differentiate and take the "or" out of married and make it separate, and then the domestic partnership as separate,
Okay.
because even though you behave like you are the same, they're not the same. So it'd be helpful to know that differentiation a little bit. And then the other component was to increase, because I just cut and paste the total income compact, understanding here, whether we need to increase that 122 X and then 140 over.
Yeah, that's the only thing I was considering.
Maybe 2 more slots,
Yep.
because I can see like an 18-year-old who's just out of high school making 30, but someone who's 25 with a engineering degree, working remotely for a firm in the city, good night, making $1.50, $1.75. So I don't know how we want to, 60 to 90 is 30,000, so we're 120 to 150.
Yeah, if the 120 is you said that's the,
Yeah, that was the other
Median.
thing, yeah, the median is,
then I think, then it seems appropriate to go with
Go that far over.
too far over, let's
Yep.
kind of see that distribution.
where did I see that? I told you that. Median family income is 125, median household income is 109.
Yeah, so,
And I had a question, like, so it's different, we're asking the question total annual income. And really I have the same thought on 9 through 12. How do we avoid duplication of household? Where one person could answer the survey as head of household for a house, or, my wife and I could both answer the survey and double dip on quite a few of the questions.
Well, we talked,
component.
right, we talked about that as to how we'd phrase this component.
Okay.
So the town aware is beginning a planning process to guide the future growth, et cetera. What should the town preserve, and various questions. So then, if we, in our directions, we might want to address the idea of head of household,
Okay.
okay? But we'd also want to, what if you woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day? Or you're at wit's end with each other and you're not cooperating, and you want each,
Yeah.
have a different
So,
opinion.
yeah, maybe just discuss with those in your household who will
Yeah.
be,
So that was something that we were gonna talk about at a later date, to
okay,
differentiate the instructions.
will be discussed.
And that could be an opportunity, depending on how the, how the questions actually, how they get developed. There could be a section, answer the following questions as you as an individual. Answer the
Right.
following, the next section, answer this
Yeah.
following questions
I
as.
mean, even just a question,
for your household.
how many people in your household are you answering for? And then we can take that and use it as a multiplier.
Yeah, did we ask I'm just thinking of the composition of the household. Just not to lose the prior thought, which was on the brackets for income. I think that was an offshoot
Yes,
from that.
correct.
This, just to come back to that, what the upper threshold should be. So if it's it seems like we're going 120 to 150, 150 to 180, and 180 plus
One-
would be represent the full
Yep.
curve.
Okay,
And then I would just ask that we've got 0 to 30, and then we start at 31, I think that should be 30,001. We have a gap.
oh, yeah. Well, we do that with age too, but, because we're not looking at, we took the whole month thing out,
Yeah.
you know?
But even if that were 40 and then 41, like, how long have you lived in where? 30 to 40, 41 to 50. Just so that you deduplicate the overlap.
Sometimes when I see that in,
So you want 31 to 50? So that's gonna go back all the way to the beginning, right? So it's under a year, 2 to 5, and then we're
And then
doing
6 to 10.
6 to 10,
Yeah.
6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, 21 to 25.
And then once you hit the tens, 31 to 40, 41 to 50, 51 to 60. And then what were your thoughts on the last few where they kind of went back out to fives? Or do we just do 61 to 70 over 70?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna X
Yeah,
out
we're gonna
that
go by
65
tens.
there. Yep.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then, yeah, same thing on
Yeah,
the
because we
income.
do that, the age group, we did it correctly, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then, the only thing else on the first page that I thought that blew at the place of primary residency,
Yeah, that made sense.
okay,
What
I just
number is
wanted
it?
to be sure.
Polly, I'm gonna make sure,
On number 1,
oh, back up to
primary
one.
residence, secondary resident, place of primary residency, to add that in, because I didn't think we talked about that. Or if we did, I made too many scribbles and I couldn't.
Oh, I had 2 typos that carried over from the original.
Yeah, the
Question 4, other, please, is spelled wrong.
yeah, I corrected
And
that.
Question 6, it says how long to,
Correct that.
and it should be how long do you plan in question 6.
Do you, okay,
Nope,
Thank
that
you.
was all I had for this
Yep.
first page.
perfect. All right. Anything else on that page, Sean?
No, thank you.
Okay. So then we move to the second page and deal with transportation. And we suggested that this be eliminated. And I think the intent of the elimination was because of the present questions. But I put in the reference here, observation, that this is part of the present master plan, and we should consider forming different questions for this section.
And I guess if you would allow me just a second. So along the lines with, we've got question criteria, I think it would be useful, and I had this open, sitting at the dinner table a minute ago, keeping in mind the 674:1.
Yeah,
That actually lays out, like, what are we allowed to, I'm sorry, it's actually 674:2. I don't, okay, so we are required to include a vision, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but a vision, a land use section. Those are the only requirements. And then
Right.
you may include a transportation section, that's the very first one listed.
right,
Community facilities, economic development, natural resources, and I'm not gonna belabor reading all these right now, but I think it could be useful, if we have the question criteria right in front of us, to have that exact same thing right in front of us of, are we
Yeah.
addressing what the RSA actually says we
Right.
have to and what we can do?
Yeah,
And
pulled up.
because it says we can, I tend to agree with your blue comment here that if we think it's worth including in a master plan, then we should be asking questions about it.
right. So my thought, and I think I mentioned this last meeting, is that there's already been a survey done pertaining to public transportation. It'd be helpful to know the outcome of that,
Yep.
and whether that can help guide us in this section.
Yeah, okay.
Because if that information's already been asked, and I don't know what the demographic results are, do we re-ask the same questions in this document? Or do we rephrase or restructure?
Yeah.
Because
And
one
at
of the,
that point, it may justify actually removing it if the goal is to still put information in the plan, if we have all the information, okay, why ask again? But I assume that's not gonna be the result. We'll realize, okay, that got us some good info, but we have a lot of gaps that we need to fill in
right,
with
right,
this.
which points to, when we look at the general issues question. Too many things open here. When I looked at the general issues question, we talked about moving that to talk about tonight, but also to move later in the survey. And when I started thinking about it, is that some of these things are being addressed already.
Yeah.
So is it redundant, for one? And is that more, because are these things leading? And I'll just use the example, when they ranked it, the top rank was tax burden, and the last one was protecting drinking water quality and supply. And, okay, so that's
Yeah.
dealing with aquifer, if anything, as opposed to, because we don't have public water.
A little bit.
Yeah, but not enough to warrant the question. Would it?
Well, I'd say we can ask the question, do you think this should be a priority? Should public water be a priority?
Right. I don't know, it's hard. It's a hard thing, to be honest, because when living in Glen, it was a big issue.
So that particular question, I think, look, the criteria mentioned before, you could get inaccurate responses, because at face value, this would fall into the criteria of education. How much public water is there? If we're saying it's under 10%, our response rate, say, at face value, the answer may be yes, without any understanding as to what the prevalence of it is. So it could disproportionately make it seem like a priority in contrast to something else. That would be the position I would take on that in terms, especially if it was bumped up like another question perhaps.
Yeah, and we'd have to double check, we're talking about writing this for SurveyMonkey, so kind of still talking about that. I think, or I would suspect that we could have it randomize the order of this when it asks the questions. So that would hopefully take us out of that trying to rank it
Oh, okay.
in some proper order. It's at least
right,
worth checking.
Yeah,
But to the transportation, question number 12. So just to get a running start here, last time we said that we suggested striking it from the questionnaire. Since then, reconsidered, it should be, Sam, if I heard you correctly, it's called out in the master plan, so in the RSA, it may be included, but it's
Correct.
called in master plan, so there's some basis to explore it.
Yeah.
So then to come back to what the answers were from last time, so this data is, say, 20 years old. What I see from the responses here is predominantly focused on non-town transportation items, right? So this is 149, 114, 93, et cetera. So my question here is I think that the basis for a question in part should be driven by what's the progress on the master plan been since? What are some of the initiatives? And if there's anything around transportation, then versus a broader, it's kind of a broad question. Is there anything that, my question in that is there anything from the master plan that would give insight as to what a pointed question could be that would be meaningful to Ware residents? And something that we could take, because that's the question initially, at least by the answers provided, that tells me the question was too broad. So
Correct.
if there's a way, if it's meaningful to stay, then is there a way to hone in on a question that is actionable? And that could be rooted in something from the master plan or a transportation initiative that I may not be aware of, that needs more insight or support.
right. And to pick up on that too, I think we referenced last time on page 279 of the report, or the master plan, there's no detail. There's only an overall finding.
279?
Yeah, page 279. Right? I think
Yeah,
that's-
correct, right, that's what I'm
It's
referencing.
just a detail, and so there's no overall information for us to discern. The question that I think you're asking is, how helpful would this be if we don't know what their real response was, other than this overall findings? Because that's a summary by somebody who didn't take the test. Right? So when we look at transportation per the RSA, suggested items to consider may include, but not limited to, public transportation, park and ride facilities, and bicycle routes or paths or both. And I think we touched on a little bit of that last time when we looked at the traffic pattern changes that are taking place on Concord Stage through Clinton Street, on Page's Corner, and onto exit 2, with traffic lights at exit 2, four-way stop at now at Page's Corner. Any morning from 7 to 9, it's constant bumper to bumper going to Concord. So the first park and ride is all the way to 89. There's no park and ride anywhere. Would that be a benefit to us? Would that be something, I mean, that's something we could ask, you know? And then the other thing that immediately comes to mind is that sometimes people don't like to ride with others that early in the morning because they haven't woken up or did their morning constitution or whatever. So is that something to consider, a park and ride, or bicycle routes or paths, or both? Or development of, and that's not under this is under, that would be under, what would it be under, natural resources? No. Recreation. Whether we look at some of our town forests to develop trail systems for walking, hiking, or mountain biking or bicycling, or is it, I don't think it is really, is the former rail that went through town actionable to develop as another bike path that could connect to Goffstown? I don't think so on some of the places where it crosses the river on River Road. It would be hard to recapture that without a bridge. But are there places in South Ware from Riverdale down that could easily develop something that, and then work with New Boston, because we'd have to cut through there, or Goffstown a little bit. Is that something, is that under this automobile, bicycle, pedestrian?
Well, they do list it as suggested items to be considered. Maybe we can ask the question in a non-leading way of like, is this of interest?
Yeah, because it seems that the questions that were asked before were all leading to where are the trouble spots, as opposed to what are some options for solution. There's no solution. It's just pointing fingers. If we're gonna ask, okay, so there's some safety concerns based upon the 20-year-old, and we can identify those safety concerns by the present report or plan, and say, are these still a concern? Are these areas still a concern? And then build upon that to say, okay, now what are your suggestions to solve those problems? As opposed to just looking at the concern, you know? And I don't know how to phrase that, and I didn't take the time to go
Processing that.
look at others as far as what they looked at and how they asked things, but.
So I invite calibration from both of you. One of the things that I find myself trying to be mindful of is that there will, generally speaking, always be higher demand than resources, especially provided the opportunity to select items under the presumption that they are, by virtue of them being asked in a question, are possibilities.
Sure.
Right. And so it's like, perhaps an example, it would be asking, like, hey, where we want to go to vacation, let's say with the kids, let's go on vacation, and you know that the budget is like, we can do X, Y, and Z, and, you know, Disney's not part of it, right?
Yeah.
So how to take that into consideration, knowing that we don't have a lot of concrete items to work with. And so.
I guess I'd
Go
like,
ahead.
sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt.
No, please.
It would be nice if we could ask these questions, get back feedback, and know that it cannot all be done. But if we had a plan that, okay, the town will take on what it can, but we constantly have people, you know, tons of Eagle Scouts every year, like, what can I do? What can I work on? And if we can say, hey, people are really interested in, like, cleaning up the rail trail, because there's a little bit of one on River Road. It's totally overgrown.
Right.
Like, just go knock it out. If we knew that was of interest, then we'd be able to say, so, your concern is 100% valid, and if we could collect the data, but still know, like, we cannot do all of this.
So if we, historically, this is like doing a constitution for a church, for an organization, or whatever. You do it, you get it done, you go, phew, it's done. And you go live your life. And 50 years later, you find out you're not doing what you said you're doing, right? And so you're trying to scramble to reconstitute yourself. Well, that's what we've done with our master plan. It's 20 years. We've attempted within 10 years to do something, didn't work. So I guess one of the things to address, because we do this with the CIP, right? We make plans that these things need to be changed, needs to be addressed. We need a new truck, and it's 5 years out. Why is it that we can plan like that for spending money when we're not planning like that to implement this? And that's
Really, those two should go together.
right. That's my ultimate concern when I first came on the board and we started thinking about this. I said, well, what got done? Tell me what got done and all the actionables, what got done. So those things, there were things that got done, majority didn't get done, because it got done and then just got put on the shelf, as opposed to it giving some guidance to what needs to change. And maybe that's because there's too much information to support the reason why we do the thing in the first place, as opposed to getting more information. Now, these are the actionables. In 5 years, what ones are we gonna implement? In 5 years later, what are we gonna implement? And work it out that way, so that you have a plan. So every now and then, we have a forester come and assess our town forest, right? And he or she says, these trees need to go, or this lot doesn't need to be touched. And then you go and run for money to pay for however you're gonna have that policed or properly addressed to safeguard it. Why isn't that being implemented concerning the master plan for one, but also for, say, Parks and Rec, or for forestry? I don't even know if we have, other than the selectmen overseeing the town forests.
Conservation.
Conservation Committee, what are they doing? Are they just protecting land, or are they looking at how can our community enjoy that open space or that forest in a more constructive, beneficial way?
Would that example there be a consideration with the planning board in conjunction with survey results? Sort of an analysis from the conservation committee and
Yes,
the like?
yes. So that's one of the downfalls of every committee that we have in town, is that there are priorities that are right fresh hot on your table that you have to address, and you have to put out the fire, and you have to address those things. And then as a result, the things that are on the fringe, developing relationships between all those committees, and because we overlap. And how, when we started addressing wetlands issues, we had been talking 3 years about it, and then when we finally brought forward a warrant about it, then the Conservation Committee came forward to say they didn't like what we did, and we rushed it. And it was 3 years' worth of work of getting that done. And we ended up taking it off the table anyways. But that's the point, is that sometimes we get caught up in doing multifaceted things without staying engaged with each other to know what's going on. And it's no fault of any one person or one committee or one board. It's just the nature of the beast, is that we go through this season of, well, now we need to ramp up for elections, now we need to ramp up for warrant articles, now we need to ramp up for the budget, now we need to, all those things take precedent, and those other things don't get addressed. Or if they do get addressed, they get a nice little pat on the back. Okay, just calm down. We'll address that sooner or later. Yeah, that's 30 years later. But that's the kind of dynamic that I think this document should represent. So how to effectively get that across so that we have I think one of the things that I've purposed to do in the churches I've served is, if we made a change to a document that gives us our bylaws or our constitution, that gets reviewed every 5 years, regardless if there's change or not. Because you want a living document, you don't want a dead document. And so we've done that 6 times since I've been here. Not because of every 5 years, because that would be 30 years, I've only been here 22, but every time the change took place, we examined the whole document, not just that one section that needed to be addressed. So if that dynamic becomes more of our behavior as a planning board, to realize that it's mandated by the state that the master plan is under our responsibility, unless we give it away.
I don't know that you can.
No, but it's mandated, so why wait 10 years? Why don't we do it every 5 years? We need to address, did we implement the things that were talked about and what needs to change? Because at the planning board meeting, that's the sense that came out. Instead of looking at, okay, we're gonna do this questionnaire, which is good, that gets us started. But then the question, well, the consensus, not the consensus, a couple members noted that we weren't gonna redo the whole thing, but choose a section and address it.
So perhaps,
But
So,
My problem with that is now you're looking at a year out on one section. So you're gonna look at 9 sections, that's 9 years. So now you're working at 20, 30 years out. You finally get it changed, and it's really not changed, it's just a section at a time changed. So I digress.
it's helpful.
So we want to, I think we really want to address this transportation issue, not nix it. I would like to see language that says, in the 2003 survey, these primary locations were identified as problem areas in the town of Ware. Are they still? And if yes, what are your thoughts on solutions? And granted, that opens up a whole, it's not specific as far as check this box, because we don't want that per se on this particular thought, because that would be leading. We don't want to be leading, but we want to, okay, so you complain. And anyone who complains at church, I say, so what's the solution? Well, we need to do this. Oh, great, I'm glad you volunteered for that. Because you're going to be the complainer, you're going to be the solution to the problem, as opposed to, well, I'm good at complaining. That's not helpful.
So maybe to build off that, so the questions as is, the subsections of the questions, I'm not in favor of.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, so as an example is, and I'm not, Salem, please chime in on, like, we were talking about some of the trails and some of the other suggestive items where that might fit, because I'm curious. But if there's not specific items that have been worked on, we could get further insight. The questions are more binary, right? So are you able to, and this is not worded correctly, but the spirit of this, are you able to compute as your life demands? Are you able to do that? Yes or no?
Commute, you said?
Commute. Are you able to get around town? Are you able to do, right, whatever that is, it's going to be within the perception of the person taking it at that time. There's no sort of guiding language. It's also not negative, it doesn't have a negative bias in terms of what other traffic issues you're having or challenges you're having, because again, that can bring sort of skewed data. The opportunity here, where it doesn't seem that there's been really an ongoing emphasis on this topic, that are within the confines of Ware managed resources, that this question is comprised of sub-questions like that with opportunity to do write-ins. I think this is a chance where write-in answers versus selectable list would pertain.
Yeah, it's still a bounded list. There are only so many roads in town.
Right.
And I think it would be helpful to, perhaps this is where, again, to the other criteria, the question is where you educate the respondent where possible. In a question like this, it could be excluding state-supported roads such as 149, 77, 114.
Yeah, so the selectmen didn't sign off on the repaving of 114 in Concord Stage?
We were notified.
Just notified?
Yep.
Okay.
And a procedural question, is it within our bounds to, we have an audience member? We've been on this question for some time, to get a perspective.
Sure.
No. Not to put, Greg, if you'd like to,
What's the,
this is question 12 on transportation.
I don't have that in front of me. What's your specific question to me? I should come up.
Do you have any suggestions?
If there's anything from the conversation, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if there, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't move on to the next question, since we've been on this question for some time.
Right. So I'm Greg Smith, I'm Reservoir Drive and Ware, and the question is related to transportation survey questions?
Correct.
And,
Not the transportation survey that just happened,
Right.
but the questions about transportation that we're discussing for this survey.
and you'd like me to weigh in on what?
If there's anything in the conversation that had taken place as being here.
Ah.
If there's not,
Oh,
that's
okay,
fine.
just general comments on
Yeah.
this?
It's fine.
I like your idea of checking to see if transportation issues identified in the previous master plan have been tackled or not. And for full disclosure, Sean has separately asked me, and I have agreed to take a look at the old master plan and just sort of provide general commentary on what seems to have been done and what not, and I'll take a look at that. The only other comment I would offer is that addressing these questions is very difficult. There's many ways to ask the questions, and so I guess I'd say you need to decide first what you want to learn and then how to ask the question. And I would also note that in some cases, it's necessary to have a closed question with the multiple choice list so you get the analytics that you mentioned earlier. But in other cases, in order to avoid leading, you almost have to ask an open question.
Right.
And I would argue that transportation is one of those areas where an open question might be more necessary. So for instance, you've discussed, is it worth, would it be great for recreational purposes to convert the old rail bed for the North Ware line of the Boston and Maine Railroad into a rail trail? Many people would love that idea, but there's costs and difficulties with it. If and you've also mentioned maybe bike lanes, which exist in some towns in New Hampshire. I mean, it's really tempting to ask those questions because those are things I'm interested in, but I would argue that it might be better to ask, are there unmet recreational needs that you perceive, to see what the town brings forward, so you're not just giving them a list of what you happen to think of,
Right.
So I don't want to ramble here, so I should
No,
stop.
no, which is addressed in another section as far as recreational areas and facilities. That's.
Yes, and that may-
as far as community facilities services.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, trying to remember from my psych degree days, that you can easily manipulate by asking the same question 16 different ways.
Oh, yeah.
You'll get 16 different answers, or you'll get all the same answer because of the way you ask the question. So, and we don't want to go down that road. We want to be exploring and understanding
Thank you.
what the current consensus or perspective is, as opposed to manipulating the data. So that's why I said, on the next section on general, that just seems like there's a lot of things addressed there that are addressed elsewhere. And if we're gonna have that general session, it should go towards the end of the book, more questionnaire than at the beginning or in the middle here. But I think we're getting at the heart of asking, the first question, it says, please respond to the following, eliminate that, don't say that. Please respond to the data given or the results of the 2004 master plan findings pertaining to transportation dealt primarily with areas of safety concerns that exist in Ware. And begin with that, and then build off of that to say, some of these areas deal with so those deal with mainly state intersections. So excluding state roads, are you able to commute as your life demands? I mean, that's a question you posed already, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a good question to ask, and that's a yes or no question. And then broaden out that. A recent survey was done by X, and identify who did that survey, and maybe you didn't have the opportunity to participate in that. Maybe we could put a link in. I don't know if that's closed, they can't do that any
think it's
longer?
closed.
Okay, so if we would, and I didn't do the questionnaire, so I don't know what the questions were, but maybe we can glean some of those questions off of that information to include or exclude questions, so I would say at this point in time, we need to table and move on.
Yeah, and to fill in the gap a little bit, that questionnaire was mostly driving towards providing transportation for seniors who don't have it.
Right.
And the result, there were very few respondents, I think, across a town this large, but the response was, it would be great if we could do a volunteer-based one. Plenty of people are happy to volunteer.
Okay.
Probably outside survey etiquette. But in terms of what I'm thinking, just to close out this question for now, I know we're tabling it, but if one question to simplify would say, are you able to get around? Are you able to commute as your life demands? One. The second part, help you say this better, but are there any transportation, means of transportation offered by other towns that may be helpful in Ware? So that's the part where it's referencing a different town, but it's sort of trying to, without providing a list, expand maybe get some of the, some expanded ideas.
Okay.
And I know that is a bit obtuse.
No,
But maybe
that's
the
good.
spirit of that,
So-
when we
so
come back to it, the
co-
spirit of that can get
Come-
captured.
Yeah, but coming down to expand on that thought, though, so our community is rural in nature, but its demographic of experience is they want suburbia in practice.
Well,
And
I don't
here-
know that we know that.
Well,
And that's what we will find out.
Yeah, but I kind of have that inkling, only in the sense, in the time I've been here, our after-school programs were usually run in-house, in the school. Teachers stayed and ran those after-school programs or ran their prior-to-school programs. As time has more changed, different entities have come in and run the morning and the afternoon programs. Now, our middle school is running Boys and Girls Club programs. And they have larger resources to fund that program, whether the families are paying for that program or whatever. But there are Boys and Girl Clubs transportation provided. It's not provided by our school system. It's not provided by our parents. It's provided by the Boys and Girls Club because the buses are here, transporting kids here, there, and everywhere. Whether it's the summer program or whether it's after-school program. So where there's been a shift in focus and understanding of how we care for those students who are going home to an empty home if they're not in these programs. So that dynamic, as I witness it, has, and it's, granted, this is anecdotal, it's telling me something about our community that's changed drastically from 20 years ago. So that we're looking at now programming that provides transportation, programming that is not related to the school, or the school, I don't know how that works, whether that program gets free grace to use the facility, or they have to pay for this facility. I don't know how that works. But just to kind of get that off my chest, yes. But that kind of gives me an understanding that transportation-wise, we're changing. And there are some services that are provided by individuals who are working for organizations out of Manchester, who are providing transportation for the elderly, doctor's appointments, et cetera. It's there. They just connect and they do it for free, but it's organized through a Manchester organization, whether it's Catholic Charities or another organization that is providing that transportation. So those services are available. But I think getting back to, are you able to commute as your life demands or move around town as your life demands? I think that's a good question to open up.
Gives
So
overall
I'll ju-
sentiment.
Huh?
It'll give an overall sentiment.
Yeah, so I'll take those three thoughts and try to cast them as to the three questions, maybe more in this section, as well as drilling with walking and biking trails as to, and see what you think.
Okay.
Is that okay? All right. Again, so this is a concern. It's not even, it's ranking 5 things on question 14, which is now what? It's question 15. Yes. Question 15. Is this something, the way this is, and you mentioned Monkey can randomize this every time? it's-
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
At a high level, it seems appropriate that question 15 would precede 14. You get opportunity to identify sort of, because question 15 is evaluating, ranking the full services,
Right.
which may be
Yeah, say either at the very beginning or the very end.
Yeah, I think
If we are,
if we expand this question, this is more of a vision question, the general issues. Would you agree?
yes,
Because you're saying over the next 5 years, what are? Right? So that should fall under that last section, vision, goals, and objectives. Which gives us more of a, what's the word I want to use? It will give us, if we add that to the last 5 questions as the beginning part of vision, it will help us to get them thinking in these are their priorities, as opposed to now I'm gonna jump in and start complaining. What are my priorities? How do I see those, maybe those last questions get now built upon out of this?
yeah,
So now, what's your number one issue? Your number one issue, you take your 5 issues and tell me, what are your solutions to those 5 issues? And those are the 5 answers, 5 questions that follow that, to look at part of the vision and goals and objectives. 'Cause
Oh,
now
I see
we're
what
giving,
you mean, yeah.
so now we're in one sense empowering the survey taker to kind of put it on online. Oh, these are your priorities, okay, so how do you now see those implemented?
yeah. Well, and so I see this 2 ways, and I don't really have an opinion on which way to do it. So I totally agree with what you're saying here. But do you put that at the end, after they've seen all the other questions, and you've kind of, like, I would think that someone would have their mind made up after they've seen everything, and then they would just fill in, and then you'd say, great, now what are your solutions? So that seems fine at the end.
Yeah.
Or at the beginning and say, just, what's your gut? Like, what are your top 5? And then they're off the cuff almost, like, what does your gut tell you the top 5 things are? And now we want details for another 10 pages, and we want your solutions. And again, so I'm offering 2, like you had talked about putting at the end, I'm offering an alternative that, again, I don't know that I even prefer it. I just wanted to throw it out there.
All right, so if we're gonna look, so if that's the case, then as an option, then general issues should come before transportation.
For sure.
So if we have that, and then we come to vision, whether it's at the end or the beginning, it matters little. But how we propose or phrase the vision questions should be reflective upon, now you go back to your general issue concerns based upon your overall survey of what you've just done, and address for us your top 5 in a constructive way in propositions that can be implemented. Not wish list ideas, but propositions that can be implemented. So that they're now thinking outside the box of just answering the survey to give now, well, what's your vision? Well, this is my vision. Well, how are you gonna implement that? If these are your top 5 issues over the next 5 years for Ware, New Hampshire, how are those gonna be addressed?
So how do you comport, we're gonna say this is your vision, you know, think outside the box, but not a wish list?
Correct.
So how do you, because if, you know,
Oh, 'cause
I'm gonna
a
go
wish
back to the
list-
example of a walking bridge on the rail trail. Like realistically, that's never gonna happen. Nobody's gonna spend money on that. But if you want people to think about things like that,
So I guess we then ask to prioritize those things and to ask, is this a need? Is it a necessity? Or is it a wish? So now we ask those 2 separate sets of questions. What's your wish list of vision-wise? What's the necessity? What are the things we absolutely need to have over the next 5 to 10 years implemented and where that you believe to be a priority? This is the mountain you're gonna die on. But these other things, well, those are all my wish things. Those things really, I'd like to see that happen, but I know that's not possible.
Yeah.
But still tell us what those wish things are, because it may be that wish opens a door of opportunity to say, well, that can happen with very little money, or very little investment, or,
yeah, if somebody has an idea
yeah.
and presents it, yeah.
So it comes down to really asking that hard question of, all right, what, in your mind, based upon these 5 rankings, what are the actionables? If the tax burden's too high, what's your opinion of how you're gonna solve that? Well, we could say, well, just cut taxes. Okay, so that's gonna affect a lot of things that you become accustomed to. Is the tax burden upon the individual the issue? Or is it that we don't have enough business to support bringing the tax base down? Is that, because that's number 3 on the list, is attracting new business. Well, you can't attract new business if you don't have a place to put it.
Yeah. And really, that reminds me, so this is part of the town, which is, people are impacted by the school system, but the planning board has no oversight and none of that, but it's 80% of the tax burden.
Yep.
So if that is it's always gonna be people's concern. Do we just totally ignore that? Do we ignore the schools entirely because,
No, I think that needs to be added. All right, so if we were to look at the end of the list, where is that piece of paper?
Well, and just to the RSA 674, you called previously, so it does give some guidance here in terms of how to focus that. Section 1, right in the definition here. More specifically, so the purpose of the master plan, sit down, declare as possible.
Yeah.
That's the most appropriate future development of the area under the jurisdiction of the planning board. So if the school's not under the jurisdiction of the planning board,
Yeah.
I think that could be a demarcation there to not muddy the waters
Right, but,
in that context.
but,
Go ahead.
but, the new school addressed a bunch of things from the 2004 report. Community center. Everybody and their brother uses that cafeteria, or whatever you want to call it. All of our recreational programs through the winter and the fall use that gymnasium. Our food pantry for the community was once housed in one of those classrooms for a good 10 years. That was not being used. That's not planning board jurisdiction. Those things are part of the answer to what happened. All the while, because they needed a new school, we got a new fire department, new police department. I mean, the police department used to be in the basement here. And I don't know what their records looked like at the end of the time here, and then the fire department was scattered everywhere. There was 2 doors here, as far as that little building was concerned. And now we've got all because one thing affected the other, whether, I don't know which came first, the school or the fire department, or both at the same time, the chicken and the egg type of thing. But that answers the questions that was of concern. And it was a cooperative type of event, so to speak. And even if you think about the dynamic of what takes place during the patriotic celebration, of what's used for property, that event spills over onto school property. For parking, for several rides on the softball field behind or next to the skateboard park. So there's a dynamic that's taking place. The same thing happens every afternoon for that whole school program. What are they using for a facility? They're using town property. And the first thing I think of is that, okay, so did they get a permission slip to leave school property for that event? They're off school property, but it's right next door. It's not school property, it's town property. With the gazebo, that whole grass area, there's the town's property. And so there's this dynamic that's assumed that helps us to understand that, yes, planning board has no say over, other than as long as it's meeting the regs, setbacks, et cetera, because they had to come before the board to get permission to build that, right? They had to do a site plan in order for that to take place. So that site plan was approved. So even though it's not under our bailiwick, so to speak, the influence of what happens is clearly under the guidance of the master plan and et cetera, even though it's not, quote unquote.
The emphasis there, I think that, at least for me, the distinction is on the deployment side. Right, and I think there's going to be sort of cross-pollination, right?
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of how we work together and get creative on how to find solutions
Yeah.
to findings.
Right.
On the front end, from a questionnaire standpoint, that's the line of demarcation.
Like
So like, say, for instance, the answer, the question was around recreational facility, opportunities, prior survey. And there's high, there's a lot of energy around having space for community events. And, which would pertain to the guidelines of the survey.
Right.
That's then extracted into the master plan, and then to everything you just said, the solution was, we work with the school, that becomes an opportunity, we
Yeah,
we
I
leverage
mean,
those
how many
resources,
people
but-
do you see at the end of the day walking our public sidewalk, which is the school sidewalk, not the public sidewalk? Public sidewalk's on this side of the fence. They're walking around the school. They walk all the way down, go all the way back up, go around the loop, come back down, and that's what they do. Or if they're not there, they're at John Stark walking the track.
Say more on that, because I think I'm not following entirely.
So the opportunity for recreational activities isn't always provided by the community as far as the town. The school provides it unbeknownst to them. So they're providing an opportunity to walk around the building here at John Stark. I don't know how many people are walking on the track around the football field on a regular basis in the evening, because it's safe, it's generally somewhat lit, and you're not dealing with traffic, you're not tripping over issues and falling and getting hurt, in that setting. So there's some, I guess, give and take, so to speak, that automatically happens. And maybe people aren't thinking the thought that, well, I pay for that, therefore I should be able to have, no, you don't, that's not always the legitimate, I couldn't see it, but I've been watching. Thank you. So,
yeah, the only reason I brought it up was I don't know that, because everything you're describing is an output of the former plan. What I'm saying is, I don't know that we can use it as an input into,
correct, okay.
and we could put whatever we want in the questionnaire to a point, but, if we ask questions around the school, I don't know that we can then put it in the plan.
Okay. So there's nothing other than schools, it says. So there's nothing here with schools on it, right?
No, I brought it up because we were talking about, people's concern about tax burden,
Okay,
and that is
correct,
an outsized chunk of the tax burden.
correct. Yeah, and even under, school systems under the next section and first on the list.
Yeah,
perhaps tax burden is not an appropriate answer there, for the same reason. Tax burden, it doesn't fall solely under the jurisdiction of the.
I mean,
planning board.
you can say the town tax burden. But if you want the town to come deal with your taxes, I mean, we could shut the town down and you're still paying 80% of what you pay today. So like, it's not a whole lot we can do.
Right,
Doing our best, I'll put it that way.
correct. Well, the dynamic of our current economy and cost of housing affects that tax burden, and the town has no control over that. I mean, people who bought a house 10 years ago, their house is like 5 times more expensive now. And they can't just go and sell it thinking they're making big bucks and they go buy something. You can't go buy something else for that amount of money.
But if the town and the schools were not spending as much money, their taxes would not have been going up just because of the price of their house.
True.
And some of it's unavoidable.
Correct. That's my guess, that's my gist, I guess.
And I think it's a known answer, right? If we look at the answer from previously, it's gonna be on the top of the 5 answers given. And I guess the part that jumps out to me, it's a function of the other answers,
Yes.
right? So it's almost double jeopardy,
So do we ask it?
because tax burden is not in and of itself an issue in terms of like, can't take an action on tax burden singularly. Like if there's a
Right, we would-
affordable housing, you
yeah.
can take an action on housing, you can take an action on transportation, you can take an action
Right.
on.
If, it is true if we provide the option to say you want less of these things.
Yeah.
And that was my
well,
problem with the original one, it was always more. But,
Trade-offs.
yeah,
And I think that's I think that we discussed it, you got touched
But-
upon in terms of, to the spirit of that, is what items, like, what are the top priorities? What items could, or,
yeah, if you want to keep your tax burden the same, but you want more of something, something has to go.
So, does planning affect the tax burden?
Yeah, absolutely. By determining, like, housing density. The more houses, the more businesses, the more that are allowed to come in, that modifies the tax base,
Okay,
which modifies the tax burden.
gotcha. All right, so, go back to general issues. Do you want to put it at the beginning or at the end? So, I like the idea at the beginning as opposed to the end, and here's my reason why. If this general issue starts at the beginning, right after our profiles information and before transportation, and then it's referenced under vision as a means for you now to go back to address those concerns, to say, those were priorities for you over the next 5 years. What's your vision in implementing change for those issues? On those 5 things, and you gotta address each one.
Yeah, I think mechanically we'd need to know, can we show them, the responses they gave us at the beginning, can we turn around and show them, this is what you said at the beginning,
Right,
and,
okay,
otherwise, if we can't, then maybe it has to be towards the end, and it's like, question A is, give us your priorities, remember what you're telling us right now, because you better click next, and give us priorities.
wouldn't Screen Monkey be able to, not Screen Monkey, Survey Monkey, be able to reference that
Yeah,
back?
probably,
I think
so
so.
I think we just need to find out.
Yeah. All right, so that will tell us whether we want to put it at the beginning or the end.
And there may be a branch questions which may impact if it has to be immediately following the answer, but.
Yeah.
For consideration, because I know that we're trying to keep to a timeline.
Yeah.
Tonight, but for consideration on 14, I wonder if the same question can provide three different answers. Meaning, what are we trying to learn? We're trying to learn, perhaps we haven't touched upon this, what are we doing well? What are our greatest opportunities? What are the trade-offs? Knowing that there's finite resources, right? Even if taxes could move, it's still always going to be a resource constraint. So if you look at the same answers, let's just provide, let's say the same answers in 14 exist. Of this list, what are the top five, what are the top five that we're doing well, that you believe are the top? Next question, which five are the highest priority in rank order? And all this would be in rank order. Same, so it's the same answer option, different question. What are the five that we're doing that are being delivered well?
No, it's interesting.
No,
It took me a
think-
minute to think about like why that's an important distinction, but it allows the town to say, we're doing this well and people care about it, so keep it at least at its current level. If not, give it more. Make sure it doesn't start falling behind.
Right.
If we're doing it well, but nobody cares about it, okay, maybe you can leave it alone or like cut a couple of corners here and there. And the flip side for the lower and, different priorities. Yeah, that's interesting.
So how is that, other than there's some overlap here to community facilities and services, where we give them option for ranking,
What question number for ranking on that?
14.
Yeah, so this is 14, so
No, it's the next page. Just flip your whole thing over. Oh, that's it, yeah,
yeah, number 15.
yeah.
Right, so this is, I see,
I mean, these are more specific to what we presently have.
that's a good point.
But I
I guess
don't,
the only distinction, because I think this is actually provides good information, is it's using the same ranking system.
Yeah.
To have so you have a cross comparison, say, of the same list, essentially. Right, because this is giving, I see what you mean, because this is giving a degree, like to
Yeah.
what degree
Yeah.
is the level of service?
all right, so if we then take this and add at the top, what areas are being, how did you say it, delivered?
Yeah, so the first one, the thing that I'm mindful of is sort of a negative priming. There's already, just generally speaking, we have negativity bias. We're looking for issues before we're looking for things that are.
Yeah.
It's a human thing. So,
Yeah.
starting off with, well, here's the issues, just, right? Do we have sentiment from residents as to what's going well? Like, is there a sense of, yeah? And we sort of ask it maybe later on, where it's like, what do you really like are the best qualities of where, things like that. So there may be overlap. That's why I said food for thought. But the
Yeah.
idea in the context here is that you're using the same list in a numeric way to be able to grab it better.
All right.
Cross comparison to say, and it addresses it starts to address that, hey, delving into the topic of limited resources, finite resources, we will, and be able to have sort of a matrix that comes out of that.
All right, so are there anything else that we need to put in this list that you think? I think a development of trails need to be added to walking, hiking, bicycle.
You're saying expand that one?
Yeah, just with those thoughts, so we understand what trails are, as opposed to ATV trails or snowmobile trails, which is really not a town mandated thing, that's something that,
Yeah, can I propose that we take that as an assignment?
okay. Yep,
Because I think it'd be great to see what the coming in position is. Give us a running start.
yep, for next time, okay. Which is where we left off last time.
Was, well,
So,
well,
we got far.
well, and I think it's worth saying for anybody that's watching as well, is I think that what we're revealing here is a real intention on the connectivity of the questions, the applicability, that there's a sense of, hey, these are questions that make sense, that
Right.
that we're taking it seriously. So I think, you know,
Okay.
sometimes that's what happens.
Yep. All right, so that's homework for next time. I want to quickly throw out a couple ideas for the next section within 2 minutes or less. We asked a question about community access television. I think we need to expand that to say not only community access television, but also community multimedia access. Because we're not just on Channel 6, we're on YouTube as well as town website, Facebook, et cetera. And then I thought we should expand the maintenance concept here as well to Parks and Rec maintenance and town property maintenance. Beyond just, what's the other one?
It's road and cemeteries.
Road and cemeteries, but there's also, maybe it was in the other, oh, it's under the other one, new or upgraded town facilities other than schools. So.
So how would you, you mentioned adding recreational areas and facilities maintenance. So the distinction would be, I'm thinking if I had that question in front of me and I had recreational areas and facilities, and then immediately after that, recreational areas and facilities maintenance. I'm seeing a huge amount of overlap.
Well, recreational areas and facilities are what's provided. And then secondly is how are they maintained?
So maybe not availability, but what's the word I'm looking for?
Maintenance of such facilities.
Man, there's a word right there. It's not, it's what are the options that we're providing? That's the word, a word for that. Is that the distinction you're making? It's, we offer a good selection and we are maintaining it well.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. We offer something, but are we maintaining it well, you
Yeah.
know? And what are those?
Variety,
Yeah, yeah.
that's the variety of options. But you want us to think about that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna just throw those out as two red things I'll throw
And
in for next time for us to look at, so.
you had that under recreational areas and facilities, and which one? You added maintenance to which two?
Town property maintenance, and I don't,
I know you had called out recreational areas and facilities, and then you added a new,
community multimedia access,
yeah.
or community access to multimedia. Or community access, I don't know how to say that.
Because that starts,
Community access
that would be like,
television.
oh, can you get to the internet at the library?
Yeah,
Well, that's not what we're going for. It's the multimedia that the town is providing. Do you have
Correct.
access to it?
right. Because I mean, I don't know how many people still use regular old cable,
No. I use an antenna.
you know,
Yeah.
so. Anyways. Okay. Any other, since we're gonna think about closing, we want to accept the minutes, or do we want to wait till next time?
I'll be abstaining because I was not present.
Okay, so we don't have a,
You,
we'll
you
table
would be able to vote, but,
with just two people?
yep. If you disagreed, it would, it would come to a head, but.
Yeah,
Let's table to next meeting,
okay.
which is 4?
I believe so, yeah.
I don't remember the pattern.
Yeah, it's
First and
two
third.
weeks.
Okay.
Yep,
9/4.
yep.
And then the one after that is the 18th, right? And probably on the 24th, we'll have to look at planning for the next area, whatever you want to call it, next month's meeting, October's meetings.
Do you mind sending out an email with the action items we said we were gonna take ahead of
Yeah.
next time? Thank you.
Yeah, I sent it yesterday. Did you get that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I just mean,
Yeah.
we just agreed on some just a minute ago.
Yep, yep, yep. All right,
Got the 4th and the 18th plugged in.
we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second?
discussion, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Okay. Beauteous.